Hello, everybody, and welcome to Reddit Roast number 56. For the third time now, we are recording this episode because we've had all kinds of horrible tech issues. Thank you very much to Christoph, like 1792 or whoever it was, the dude that commented on the last upload of the video that had bad sound quality. We're going to try and get it right this time. Hopefully, everything works. Fingers crossed. So, Mal, who have we got today?
So today we've got an extra long roast. A product manager who builds telescopes on his days off. We've got a younger applicant who's been stressing out over job offers, one from an investment firm and the other from a consulting firm. Um, a software engineer making bank who wants to get into IB, but we will see if that's realistic. We've got a Redditor who's volunteering his friend's profile to the RMBA sub. That's a first. We've got a trained classical dancer who works at an investment firm and a Thai general manager at a tech startup with a mission to support local farmers. And at the very end, we've got a bonus, which is from someone who's checked out mentally at work after deciding to pursue an MBA and is wondering if he's on his own. Should we dive into our
And and a blooper from our shit recording earlier. We'll
and the
add that at the
blooper?
end.
Yes.
All right, let's dive into this first profile then.
All
So,
right.
academically first, or just overview first of like how I see
Overview.
the profile.
Yeah.
Um, Actually, yeah, obviously, do you want to read through it first?
Yeah. All right. So we've got an Indian male, 29, who is currently working at WebMD as a senior product manager,
Mhm.
has been recently promoted from product manager. That is currently managing a product portfolio in continuing medical education. Um, Previously worked at yougotagift.com, which is a Dubai-based fintech, as an associate product manager. And before that was working at O9 Solutions as a business tech consultant. Also has some entrepreneurial experience. In 2024, I attempted to launch a startup focused on the creator economy to improve how brands discover and collaborate with influencers. However, due to co-founder misalignment and financial constraints, we paused the venture. Education, Punjab Engineering College from in India, with a BTech and a CGPA of 7.6 on 10. OP does say that this grading was relatively stringent, and based on WES conversions, it's a 3.3 to 3.5 on a 4.0 scale. Extracurriculars during college served as the chief secretary of the Astronomy and Space Physics clubs, managed 70 members and a 2 lakh annual budget. Also awarded a Certificate of Achievement and the Achievers Award by the Dean for multiple astronomy and space physics competitions, represented the college at the national level as well. After graduation, continues to conduct astronomy outreach programs in rural schools to promote interest in science and STEM education. OP leads workshops and does DIY projects and has directly mentored and inspired around 50 students to pursue STEM related education. Post MBA goals, I see short term product management, product marketing, or strategy roles in big tech or high growth tech companies. Long term, move into strategy led leadership roles at a leading tech company, combining product growth and platform strategy. School list, quite a few. Dream schools, Kellogg, the MBAI degree. INSEAD, target schools, Ross Duke, NYU Tech, and Cornell Tech. And safety schools include CMU Tepper, Texas McCombs, UCLA Anderson, Cambridge, and Oxford. OP has not taken the GMAT yet, is currently preparing for it. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, okay. So let's do a sort of high level profile overview first, and then we'll dive into those four specific questions that OP has. Okay, so the first thing I want to say, OP, is thank you very much for all that detail. Right, loads and loads of detail there. If every profile had this much detail, my life would be a lot easier. So thank you very much for that. Really appreciate it. So let's go academically first. Punjab Engineering College, not
Mhm.
IIT, but strong. 7.6 CGPA, not ideal. Let's say that WS conversion is accurate, 3.3 add up to 3.5. That's a little bit below the 3.6-ish average at the top, yeah, M7 type schools. No GMAT yet. I would like to see that GMAT to be slightly higher than the GMAT average to offset this and to build your academic strength overall. So that's on an academic side. Right, professional, basically a product management career. right? So starting as a sort of business and tech consultant, moving into associate product manager, and then promoted to senior product manager. This sort of good development, good journey in the product management function. Really, really nice. Generally, product managers, it's a good pre-MBA role. You're demonstrating in your work a lot of the skills that MBA admissions officers are looking for. Collaborating between lots of different teams, managing budgets, smooth communication skills, presenting to people, etc. These are typical sort of pre-MBA skills that business schools like, and you've got them in spades clearly from that work experience. I see a promotion there, explicitly one promotion. There might be others buried in there as well, but definitely helps make that growth story come through. The other professional angle that Mal, you touched on there was the startup. Now, although this startup didn't work, so to speak, it's been paused, it could be really useful for stories in your application essays. For example, Kellogg are asking, what's a difficult decision you have to make? Or at least they asked this last year. What's a difficult decision you have to make? Well, pausing the startup would make a great difficult decision to write about. Similarly, if you had a leadership story for HBS, leadership story from your entrepreneurial experience is probably going to be more on point and stronger than from working your day job. So that entrepreneurial experience could be really positive for your profile as well. So I like that. Demographic, got to be said, Indian male engineer, super overrepresented. So particularly academic stats need to be on the higher end because you're as part of a group that tests really, really well. On the other hand, yeah, right age. So part of the sort of demographic conversation is you're 29 years old, you've got 6 years of work experience, you're at the right point in your career age-wise to really benefit from a full-time MBA program. So that's nice. Okay, extracurriculars. This is super interesting. I don't know about you, Mal, but I've never come across anybody with such an obvious passion for astronomy and space physics. Certainly not in MBA world. This is really, really unique. And the schools will really like that. We kind of flag this as like a random passion. And random passions are interesting because they're unique and the schools don't see them very much. And you've definitely got that. There could also be an opportunity for this extracurricular to build even more on that leadership story. For example, conducting astronomy outreach programs in rural schools. And I think there was a mention of 2 15-day workshops as well. These are clear evidence points of leadership skills, of teaching, of community building. And those are traits that business schools really, really like. I would point out that the extracurriculars from, since graduation here count for a lot more than the ones you did during your undergrad. Everybody has undergrad extracurriculars, right? Whether it's astronomy or some sport or whatever, everyone's got something. So you don't really stand out there. But hosting workshops since graduation, that's unique. And that's where the strength lies in the extracurriculars. Cool. Next, goals. Pretty logical goals overall. For me, the product management short-term goal in big tech is the most logical pivot. So basically, kind of doing what I'm already doing, the product management role that I've got a really good track record of, but building this and applying this to big tech. You can argue that you need an MBA for that because obviously the kind of responsibilities and pressure in the role within big tech is going to be a level up, and you need the MBA for that. So that's definitely an argument that you could make. I would treat product marketing and strategy roles as maybe as backup. They're not quite as obvious as product management, which you've already been doing. So you could treat them as alternatives. You could maybe mention them verbally in an interview, but not focus on them too much in your essays. But basically treat them as backups with your main focus on the role that you've already been doing, I would say. Now, the long-term goal, where this is where the pivot into strategy can work, right? This is where the pivot from once you've broken into big tech, using the skills you've already got into a product manager role that you've already kind of done, internally then pivoting to strategy a little bit later on. That's probably the sensible career route that makes sense. So again, very, very good goals. Now, I had a brainwave here, which, Mal, you're going to like this. I was thinking, okay, my comment is going to be name the big tech companies. At the
Mhm.
moment, you've just called it big tech, and now that could mean FANG, or I can assume that means FANG, but already within FANG, there's distinctions, there's differences. So, which big tech companies are you thinking of specifically? Is it Amazon? Is it Google? Right? There's differences between these companies. Amazon, for example, have a very distinct culture of sort of data-driven leadership, etc., which is distinct from Google. So there's a choice to be made there. And then I started thinking, well, actually, maybe there are other companies that make more sense and let OP use the astronomy passion in their career narrative, in his career narrative. So I did a little bit of digging. Imagine if you kept the product manager goal, but within a kind of space astronomy industry, SpaceX, for example, right? Product manager at SpaceX. How cool would that be? That would be such a unique goal and really plays into the astronomy space theme. Another one could be StarCloud. These are a company um, um, building data centers in space, or at least developing data centers in space on satellites. Super cool. Product manager there. I found Vada Space Industries, who are basically sending factories up into space to build, to manufacture in zero gravity, because apparently in zero gravity you can build stuff that you can't build on Earth. So there are some super interesting astronomy, kind of space focused companies out there. That is a unique narrative that OP, I think, should lean into. So that's from the goals perspective. Basically, an interesting profile with real potential, but it does need to be framed well.
Mhm. And I think that does answer OP's first question,
Mhm.
which is about how competitive does my profile look for global programs. The second question is about the school list. Does that school list look realistic, or should OP rebalance it?
Yeah. So overall, I think OP is heading the right way here, right?
Hmm.
Assuming that kind of 685 GMAT, 705 GMAT comes through, OP's in the right place, definitely. Now, I would within this list, there are some that make more sense than others, and I kind of will group them by the ones that I think make sense and the ones that I think make less sense. The ones that make more sense, or the most sense for me, are the pure tech MBAs, right? MBAI at Kellogg, the New York NYU Tech MBA, Cornell Tech MBA, those, if you keep this product manager in big tech goal or in at StarCloud, at SpaceX goal, those make perfect sense. Great, fine. I also think that there are the other US schools that are lower ranked normal full-time MBA programs, those also make sense from a scholarship perspective. If OP can build a really interesting profile and get that GMAT score where he can get it, there is potential to use Ross, Texas, UCLA as scholarship plays.
Mm.
Really, really valuable. If you can get a scholarship from UCLA and then go back to another school and say, go back to the Kellogg MBAI and say, look, I had this scholarship from UCLA. I prefer the Kellogg MBAI program, but it's a difficult financial decision here. What can you do? Kellogg might come back with a scholarship. So for that reason, I think the lower ranked US schools make a lot of sense as safeties for scholarships. Now, the schools that make less sense, I think, are arguably the European programs, Oxford, Cambridge, INSEAD, not so much because of the tech conversation, and we're going to have that in a minute, but purely because these schools really value international experience, whether that's traveling abroad for work, whether that's going to international schools growing up, whether that's going to like growing up in India and going to the US for undergrad, or most valuably, if you speak another European language. Now, I
Mm.
don't see any of those in this profile, which makes me think that the fit with the European programs is perhaps less clear. Now, maybe I'm wrong and there is some international experience in there somewhere. OP just hasn't mentioned it. But if it's missing, there's not an obvious fit there. So that kind of, for me, pushes down INSEAD, Cambridge, and Oxford. The other school that's a bit less obvious for me is Duke, which is in here. Now, Duke is not a scholarship play by any stretch. This is a very aggressive and competitive school. And so it doesn't really make sense as a scholarship play, as I said, for like the Rosses and the UCLAs, but also it's not based near a tech hub, particularly in the US either, right? UCLA in LA, so near Silicon Valley, etc. CMU Tepa, a real strong tech school. Duke doesn't really have that. So it's competitive and doesn't really fit on the tech front. So it just doesn't quite fit for me either. So that's how I would kind of split up those schools. There's the tech schools that really make sense, there's the safety schools that make sense, there's the European schools and the competitive American non-tech schools, which don't really make sense.
Mhm. Okay. And are there other schools that are strong in tech and product management that OP should consider?
Yeah, there are actually. There are some really clear ones that I'm surprised aren't on the list.
Mm.
Again, it's sort of depends a lot on the GMAT here. If the GMAT came in very high, and I mean 700 plus, then there are M7s that are really strong in tech. Kellogg jumps to mind. I had a client a couple of years ago who used the Kellogg MBA to pivot into a product management role at Apple. Apple have their regional head office in downtown Chicago. In fact, it's straight down the purple and red line, I believe, into from basically straight out of Evanston, straight from Kellogg to their office. Kellogg is a really strong school for tech placements. They're also, I believe, the highest purport. We use Amazon as like a benchmark here because Amazon are the most MBA friendly tech recruiter, and Kellogg places the most people into Amazon of any of the M7s, I believe. So it's a basically, I think Kellogg should be on that list. The other school that really makes sense is MIT. Now, obviously, this is more competitive than a lot of the schools on this list, but the clue's in the name. If you're aiming for tech, MIT needs to be on there. So really, yeah, those are the two schools that really jump out as kind of obviously missing here. Obviously, Kellogg MBAI is in there, but I just think that Kellogg full-time program as well is worth considering. Um, yeah, nuanced distinction between the MBAI and the MBA, but yeah, both of them valuable for tech applicants.
Okay. And pivoting to Europe, what's the reality of tech placements there?
Hmm.
Should OP consider some other European B schools?
Yeah, so that's this final question here. It's a good question. So, on the one hand, Europe is behind the US when it comes to big tech, let's call it, right? All of the FANG companies are based out of America. All of them hate Europe for regulatory reasons, blah, blah, blah. We know that. And so if it's purely big tech you're focused on, America's much better than Europe for sure. But there's a nuance here. There are parts of tech where Europe punches above its weight, so to speak. The key ones that I put a little list together here, fintech, particularly London, is doing really well in fintech. And there are several UK domiciled and British companies doing very well in fintech. Things like the challenger banks, for example. I think Revolut and Wise are both either based out of or have like strong presence in Europe, in the UK. So that's an area of tech that Europe is strong at. It's not big tech, but it is relevant. Another one is AI startups. In the news, Anthropic at the moment are considering a London office, and they're not the only ones. There's quite a big AI ecosystem developing in, again, Europe, London specifically, but Europe more generally. So that could be interesting for tech people. And then the other final angle here that tech applicants can play into the Europe theme and apply credibly to Europe is there's a whole bunch of old school, legacy, mature companies in Europe who are desperately trying to pivot to implement new technology and move into the 21st century. And so coming in to one of those, an old school company with a view to transforming the technology stack, is a super interesting goal as well. So three different ways there that tech applicants can focus on Europe and can make a credible point that I want to be in Europe to do tech. It's not big tech necessarily, but it is relevant. The other point I would make, just to sort of push it to the other points in Europe's favor here, is that from a visa perspective, Europe is a lot more welcoming at the moment than the United States, particularly for Indian applicants like OP. And the other point is that just because you're in Europe doesn't mean you haven't got access to the US market via the MBA credential and via the American alumni and current students in the program. For example, when I was at Oxford, about a quarter of the other students were Americans, and loads of them have gone back to America. And loads of other graduates from previous years are in America in tech. In other words, your European MBA network can open doors in tech in America as well. Not as evidently as the American schools, but they does still exist. There is still a way there. Just a sort of angle that hasn't been mentioned here that I thought I'd flag.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I think that was all of OP's questions.
Cool.
Shall we move on to our next profile?
Yeah, let's do it. Thoroughly roasted that. That's quite a long one there, but hopefully useful, OP. Right, let's dive into the next one.
Next profile. Some would appreciate some honest feedback and how realistic M7 and T15 MBA admissions are for me. Background, UK semi-target university, maths background, likely graduating around a low 2-1 score, right on the border at the moment. Recently retook the GRE, scored a 335 with a perfect bond. Previously scored a 332, retook due to being bored. Fair enough. Passed CFA level 1. Prior internships across capital markets, investments, and PE. Career-wise, OP will be joining a lower middle market investment bank full-time this fall within capital markets, but also has an offer from a T1 restructuring consulting / advisory firm, and I'm honestly torn between the two. Long-term goals would be likely MBB consulting, EB investment banking, and growth equity or growth-focused asset management. OP understands neither route is bad, but they would provide very different experiences. The IB route would give OP direct transaction capital markets exposure, and the consulting route would give OP exposure to distressed situations, stakeholder management, operational plus financial advisory exposure. Quite a few questions, but what do you think of this profile first, Sam?
Yeah, let me first sort of give an overview of the profile, how I see it. It's a really interesting one. We just had a very, very similar applicant to this get an interview to the Harvard 2+2 MBA program, deferred MBA applicant. Really interesting. So from a academic perspective, look, a low 2-1 isn't great, but it's not, because it's a UK degree, it's not on the 4.0 scale, which means schools don't have to submit it to the rankings, which means it's not going to drag down their average, which means they're willing to look past it and sort of give you the benefit of the doubt and just make a separate decision about whether they think you're smart. And I think the maths background from a semi-target university, and I assume in the UK that means Russell Group, which is like not Oxford and Cambridge, but sort of the next level down, they're not going to worry that you're smart. They know you're smart. And I would back that up with a perfect quant score there on the GRE side. 335 is an exceptionally good score. Well done, OP. Submit both scores because that way you can show the commitment. Don't need to tell them it's because you were bored. You can say it's because you were committed to MBA programs. Right. So academically strong. The CFA helps a little bit, but not something the schools get ranked on, so they don't care quite as much about that. Okay. From a professional side, now, just to be super clear, OP is aiming in a few years for an MBA. So is basically at the cusp of graduating from undergrad. And for that point in his career, OP is about as good, as well positioned as he or she can be, given being fairly young. What I mean by that is really good series of internships, across capital markets, investments, PE, best in class as far as internships go. That's awesome. And then the career decision that's coming up basically isn't one way or another. There is no bad option. So professionally, OP is going to be looking really, really nice from the professional part of the application. So that's great. Extracurriculars. This is where this profile might fall apart a little bit. I don't see any extracurriculars in there at all. Now,
Mhm.
it could be because OP just hasn't mentioned it, or it could be because OP is a bit of a finance bro and has fallen into the trap that many Brits make, which is to not really get involved in extracurriculars during undergrad or
Mhm.
outside of work because they're focusing on their career. And in that case, if there isn't any extracurriculars, it could be a pink flag. And OP, if I'm right, that you haven't got any extracurriculars, now between now and applying in a couple of years' time, you need to really focus on this. Okay. Um, Demographic. None that I'm aware of. It doesn't say anything there. Uh, but I would just say here that if OP is a white male in finance, might be, then that will be a negative for your profile, a small negative for your profile, just because you're one of many and it's harder to stand out. And you don't get any sort of diversity points there at all. Just a flag. I don't know. Goals. Also not great here. Now, to be fair, OP's fairly early in his or her career, so you can kind of give him or her a bit of a leeway. But basically, it looks to me like OP has chosen all of the goals that have a good paycheck. There is a big difference between MBB consulting and investment banking and growth equity, and you need to narrow this down before you apply to MBA programs. This is too vague for the programs. Now, to do that, a couple of ways. One is get a mentor who's going to help you figure out what it is you want to do with your life. An MBA admissions consultant can also help with this based purely on like which of these is going to make the most sense for your next steps in your career. And I guess, yeah, based on the questions, it looks like we'll probably talk about that next, shall we?
Mhm. Yeah. So
Go on.
overall, what do you think of OP's profile?
Strong and
Mhm.
asking all the right questions,
Mhm.
but not a shoe-in by any stretch.
Okay. I see that OP's asked a few questions. Some of them are
Mhm.
overlapping, so I'm just going to club them. For example, which path would position OP better for M7s and T15 admissions, and also for MBB or investment banking or growth investing?
Yeah, okay. So OP's decision is for has received a full-time offer from a lower mid-market investment bank or a T1 restructuring consulting firm,
Hmm.
and he's wondering which one to take. And the question then is been split into two ways. One is which is better for the MBA admission and
Yeah.
which is better for a career in these totally different industries. Now I'm going to
Mhm.
break them up then. So from an admissions perspective, honestly, not that much in it. We see applicants from all of these backgrounds regularly break into M7 and T15 business schools.
Mhm.
So there's no wrong answer there. I would say what it comes down to is a couple of things. One is the exposure that you'll get in the role. And what I mean by that specifically is the a lower middle market investment bank, they're not all cut out the same way, nor are the consulting firms. And so it'll depend on what you see in that firm. If, on the one hand, the investment bank will highly unlikely to give you any real leadership experience between now and the MBA.
Mhm.
Particularly the capital markets parts of these businesses, which is where I used to work, have very flat structures, and you're not really managing teams until like the MD level, which is like 15 whatever years. So you're not going to get leadership experience necessarily, probably not at the investment bank. So that's a big factor. If the restructuring slash consultancy company will give you that leadership experience early on, for example, helping to manage the interns, then that's an advantage for MBA applications. And obviously, I can't say without knowing which companies they are, and you can probably have a sense of this. The other factor is the breadth of exposure that you'll get in these two different roles. If this is a rotation program at an investment bank where you move between two or three different or three or four different desks, which is what I did at Bank of America Merrill Lynch and at SocGen, then you will get a broad range of experience that business schools love. On the other hand, if the smaller consulting firm lets you get involved in lots of different industries, for example, one day you're restructuring an oil and gas company, another other day you're restructuring a hotel company, then you get much broader experience that way, and that could be more interesting. So it really depends on the offer specifically. But those are the two things I would focus on there. And then one other point is you might be able to get a sense for which is going to give you the better letter of recommendation. You're going to need in like 2 or 3 years' time to speak to your boss and say, hey, boss, I know I've just joined but after 2 or 3 years, I'm going to go and do an MBA and I need a letter of recommendation. And if your MD in the bank is a typical MD in a bank, i.e. not particularly friendly and there to beast you as hard as they possibly can, then you might have a problem getting a letter of recommendation. On the other hand, if your manager at the consulting company has an MBA themselves and understands understands the game, which is quite common within consulting firms, then that might provide a stronger letter of recommendation. So those are the factors that I think break down which is best for MBA applications. Now, the other question, question 3, but very kind of similar, is which route is better for MBB, investment banking and growth investing? Now, this I would break down into 2 different routes because MBB is very different. That's management consulting, and investment banking / growth investment are hardcore finance. And actually not that similar to each other, but still, let's just say they're finance. And finance and consulting are different routes, very different routes. And to be blunt, if consulting's where you want to end, starting in consulting makes sense too, right? If you MBB is where you want to head, the T1 restructuring consultancy is much better fit. If investment banking or growth investing is where you want to end up, then starting at the investment bank is also where you want. Yeah, it also makes more sense. So it basically, the decision is going to depend on where you see yourself and the nuances of the different firms that you've got offers from, which I can't really give any more detail on because I don't know what companies they are.
Okay. OP's other question is about the GRE. I see a couple of questions there that are linked to the GRE. Does that 335 offset the weaker undergrad performance? And can it get OP into HSW?
Okay, let me focus on that score specifically. And I mentioned this in my academic overview. Basically, OP is in a position where the GRE of 335 perfect quant is high and offsetting a low 2.1 GPA. And the short answer is yes, they can offset each other. I would encourage OP to write an optional essay explaining why that 2.1 is not a first. Potentially, for example, pointing to extracurriculars that OP was involved in, or like a death in the family, or whatever it may be. Explain that in the optional essay, and then hope that the 335 compensates for it. It will to some extent, but how much will depend on how you execute it with an optional essay, and obviously how forgiving the schools are, which is linked to how high ranked they are. So yes is the short answer. And then the other question, which is generally about which schools should OP be targeting, whether that's HSW that he mentions here, or Booth, or Kellogg, or Wharton, or blah blah blah. Where should OP be aiming in terms of schools? So at the moment, personally, I don't see Harvard or Stanford. Why? Mainly because a low 2.1 is just not that high from an academic perspective. It's not really good enough for those top schools. That's the first reason. And the other reason is I don't see any extracurriculars. And you don't really get into Harvard or Stanford with no extracurriculars. Now, I might be wrong on that. There might be some buried there, but I don't think there are. So Harvard and Stanford, I don't see. For me, Wharton is where the reach schools start. Wharton's a very focused finance school, just great finance school. OP's got these finance experience and probably the next few years at the middle market investment bank, and Wharton will like that profile. They might also go up at the 2.1 a little bit, but I definitely think OP is in with a shot there. The bread and butter and the real focus area should be the rest of the M7s, in my opinion. This Booth, Columbia, Kellogg, MIT zone here, and particularly Booth and Columbia, which are the more finance heavy schools, as opposed to Kellogg and MIT, which are a little bit more tech focused, and OP has no involvement in tech at all. So Booth and Columbia are really where OP should be focusing his or her effort. And to do that, basically, got to get that 2-1 in the bag, right on the border currently, but got to get that in the bag. And 2, get some extracurricular experiences. And then Wharton, Booth, and Columbia should be doable.
Mhm. Okay. I think we've got all of OP's questions.
Excellent. Okay.
Covered. Shall we move
Another
on?
thorough roast there. Let's move on to the next profile.
All right. Profile 3. Background, work experience, 8 years in software engineering, currently a senior software engineer at a public fintech company, a lead developer on core products. Also have interned at Wells Fargo as a summer financial analyst supporting the commercial banking group in LA back in college. Undergrad was a top 10 LAC liberal arts college in economics, was the class president of the consulting club. Postgrad had high level involvement in functional fitness and strength communities. Professional did some formal internal mentorship for junior engineers and engineering culture leadership. OP is an Asian male with a 3.21 GPA. Not taken the GMAT or the GRE yet. I see OP's put target scores for both, so maybe not sure on which one. MBA goals, target intake is 2027. OP will be matriculating at 33. Post MBA goals, investment banking associate with a tech coverage focus leads into corporate strategy roles. Target schools, Reach, Columbia, Dartmouth, Tuck, Yale SOM, targets Cornell Johnson, NYU Stern, UVA Darden, and Duke Fuqua. And regional and the tech strong schools OP is considering are Ross and Georgetown McDonough. Specific questions later, but I want your read on this profile first.
Yeah. Okay. Overall, academics. 3.21, not ideal. Yes, grade deflation. Yes, a decent school, but 3.21 is well below the 3.6 average of the M7s. So, not ideal. Hasn't done the GMAT or GRE yet. It does look like OP is targeting the right level. I would say, yeah, 330 GRE is above the average of these schools. I'm not sure if he's quite got his balance right there. I think a 330 is a bit higher than 675, but still, targeting the right kind of area for sure. So academically, TBD. With a 3.21 GPA, there's a lot riding on that GMAT or GRE.
Yeah.
Demographic, 33 male at matriculation and Asian. Pretty overrepresented, and frankly, a bit on the old side for MBA applications. Not necessarily an issue, but you're going to want to really focus on the leadership experience that those extra years bring, because that's your differentiator as an older applicant. So, not great up until here, to be blunt, but I think the professional line is where things start really picking up. I think that the fintech with a 3 to 5 billion market cap is probably quite a well-known name. It'll be some sort of unicorn or something. It could be a Revolut or a Wise or something like that. It could be really that. I think that's quite a strong brand on OP's resume. Not explicitly said, but if 8 years in software engineering and currently senior software engineer, I think there've also been some clear promotions in there as well. If there's been a track record of technical and whatever leadership, then I think there's been promotions, and obviously promotions look good on the resume as well. So that's solid. Software engineers as a group are pretty common and competitive MBA applicants. That doesn't mean you can't get admitted. It just means you've really got to stand out versus all other software engineers. And typically the way to do that is to really demonstrate emotional intelligence, which some software engineers struggle with. I think there's another nuanced piece to this about software engineering, which is that schools see you as a great partner to be a technical founder at a startup. So you'd partner with a non-technical founder who's one of your classmates, who is, by the way, somebody else who's applying to MBA programs right now and thinking, I've got this cool idea for how AI can transform my industry. I want to go to the MBA and partner with a technical founder to build that idea. You're going to be the technical founder that they partner with. So that software engineering goal experience can really work in your favor. And hopefully that gives you a little bit of color as to why. Now, extracurriculars, very punchy undergrad extracurriculars here. Class president, president of the consulting club. Those are, well regarded, but they're old. What's going to be even more important is your more recent leadership experience in extracurriculars. And I think in particular, this formal internal mentorship for junior engineers, that's really nice. That can be a whole explicit leadership experience section on your resume, separate it from your full-time job, and really demonstrate your leadership skills that you, as I said earlier, need to bring because you're an older applicant. So very, very nice extracurricular in there. Goals. I really don't like this investment banking goal. For context, for those who haven't watched a roast before, I worked at 2 different investment banks and at a market making / hedge fund company, and went through rotation programs at 2 of them. And I don't see investment banking as OP's narrative at all. Basically, the banks are hiring out of MBA juniors to absolutely beast them, right? 80-hour weeks, late end, early starts, calls on a Saturday, and a 33-year-old at matriculation who's going to be like 35, 36 at graduation. That's not the person. That's not the person they're looking for in that regard. So I don't think that from a practical perspective, they're going to like the school, the recruiters, and therefore the schools are going to like OP as a investment banking associate. Also, you don't really need software engineering experience to be to cover the software or financial or tech stocks, which is the assumption that OP is making. Someone has said to him that you've got this software engineering background at a fintech, therefore you should cover the tech stocks at an investment bank, the tech coverage focus. You don't need software engineering experience to cover tech stocks at an investment bank. The people doing this have got hardcore finance experience, maybe a little bit of tech, but if it's tech, they've got tech strategy experience, not software engineering, really. So anyway, that doesn't work as a goal. So we need to switch that up. We need to change that as a short-term goal. I prefer the corporate strategy route that OP's taken here. I would put that as the short-term goal immediately, or debate arguably a product manager role. Again, as a software engineer pivoting to a software engineer pivoting into a product manager role, that's less of a leap, and therefore schools are going to be a little bit more, relaxed about believing that you can make the leap, as opposed to investment banking where they're going to really question it. So hopefully that's sort of given an overall a good kind of view. Basically, not great on the academics yet, very strong on the professionals, great on the extracurriculars, and weak on the goals.
Okay, and coming to OP's questions, given the goal of Tech IB and corporate strategy, are there other programs like Berkeley Haas or UCLA Anderson that OP should consider to round out this list?
Yeah, I'm going to reject the goal of Tech IB here. That's not OP, should not be OP's goal, and there's no point recommending schools based on that. What I am going to suggest is that OP is focusing on either corporate strategy in tech or product management in tech, and I'll recommend some schools accordingly. The schools with tech connections that really kind of make sense, yes, Berkeley, Haas, and UCLA from the sort of West Coast proximity to the tech landscape, tech ecosystem in Silicon Valley. Yes, those obviously make sense. MIT Sloan, we said this earlier, MIT technology. Obviously, MIT should be in the running as well. Kellogg, the
Mhm.
biggest, one of the biggest tech placement MBA programs, and particularly with Amazon, who are the biggest MBA recruiter. Kellogg should feature. CMU Tepper, tech focused, but not as highly ranked as MIT and Kellogg, so they should feature as well. And I found an interesting stat earlier that UW Foster, not a school we regularly work on, but they place something like half of their cohort into tech. And that should possibly be on OP's radar as well. So slightly different from OP's list. In fact, very different from OP's list, mainly because I'm focusing on tech schools and OP's focusing on finance schools, which doesn't make sense given he has no finance experience.
Mhm. Okay. And coming to the GPA and OP's leadership experiences, does the
Mm.
3-year class presidency at a T10 LAC help mitigate 3.21 GPA for M7s? And how do AdComs view elite undergrad leadership for candidates with 8+ years of work experience?
I mean, the short answer is they will value it because it explains why your GPA sucks. If a GPA, if you had no extracurriculars and you had a 3.21 GPA, they'd be like, maybe this guy's dumb. But if OP was also three class president for 3 years, they're like, okay, well, that explains the time commitment and therefore the 3.21 GPA.
Yeah.
That's the value here. And so writing an optional essay will be absolutely crucial. It's not that they particularly value your elite undergrad leadership. Um, it's just that it shows you're not dumb.
Mhm. Okay. And OP's current salary is 360K. How
Mm.
do I effectively frame the YMBA, YIB move so I don't look like a flight risk to AdComs or banks?
Yeah, look, the first thing is that for MBA applications, a high salary is not a bad thing at all. It will, basically never be held against you. It shows you can afford the program. You're not going to have to take up too much debt. And also, they're one of the metrics they submit afterward about the cohorts that they get ranked on is post MBA salary. And if you went in with a higher salary, the chances are you're going to go out with a higher salary as well, and that helps their ranking. So, in no world is a high total comp a bad thing for MBA applications. Point one. Point two, as I said before, I really don't like the finance goal. So forget about banks here. That's irrelevant. The corporate strategy idea does make sense. And the schools are not going to question why you want to move from from an individual contributor as a software engineer into a sort of higher level leadership role as a corporate strategist or product manager. And therefore there is no worry there about flight risk, and I'm relaxed on it basically. But it does hinge on the career narrative being tech focused, not banks. And by the way, once you get into the MBA program, recruit for banks if you want. I don't think you're going to have any success, but you can try. I'm talking about your narrative that you're writing, what you're telling the schools. Once you're in, you can recruit for those if you can. If you want to, you can recruit for the banks and find out for yourself. But tech is where your application should be focused.
Yeah. All right. And OP's last question is, I will be 33 at matriculation and 35 at graduation. Is this an outlier for an NYC San Francisco Tech Banking Associate recruiting? And does my senior engineering background help bridge the age gap for tech coverage groups?
I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but I'll say it again. I mean, short answer is yes, you'll be an outlier. Um, there's a meme that I see going around occasionally of the dude holding the skateboard with a red hat. I forget what it's called. And he's like, yeah, hey, fellow kids. And it's basically this idea of being like a complete outlier, being way older than your peers and recruiting for investment banking at 35. That's exactly how you'll be. Um, so yeah, it's not going to cover it. It's not going to bridge the gap, I'm afraid. And it's a separate, yeah, it's an issue. Now, if I look down at the comments, just to, I know I sound a bit negative on this goals thing, but I just want to point out you're old, right? That's somebody here. Another one says, I work in IB. You'd not like it here. 35 is way too old to enter as an associate. Right. Um, let's keep going. ROI narrative, the real reason to change into IB. Yeah, someone's questioning it there as well. I don't think IB move is worth it. Literally every comment is people agreeing with what I'm saying. I think that point's been made pretty clearly. Okay.
All right. So, yep, that's our profile 3. Are we
Good.
ready for profile 4?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, MBA prospects. Um, this is a friend who's asking for their friend for M7s. Early mid-20s, UMass Amherst grad with around a 3.6-ish GPA.
Uh-huh.
3 years of experience in Vanguard, mainly fidelity, financial analyst, investment-focused roles, 2 promotions in 3 years, strong interest in investing, markets, and long-term business leadership. OP's talking a bit about his friend's skill set, personality. Dad went to Harvard but didn't graduate, not fully sure how the legacy works there. And OP's friend also has some mentorship volunteer experience with Big Brother, Big Sister Foundation, as well as work in other charitable foundations in New England. Assuming strong test scores and solid execution on essays and interviews, what MBA tier would you realistically put this profile in, Sam?
Okay. Let's start academically. First up, a 3.6 GPA is bang in line with the M7 average. So that is lovely. We like that. We don't have a GMAT or GRE yet. OP is assuming solid execution. It's quite a big assumption, but okay. Let's say OP can get a high 600s, low 700s GMAT score, then academics are solid. Okay. Professional. I really like this profile from a professional standpoint. Vanguard, Fidelity, those are best in class brands in sort of the asset management buy side space. Schools will really like that. It's very hardcore finance experience. Yeah, unlike the profile we just roasted. So I like that from a professional perspective. They're also not the typical pre-MBA finance companies. So we very often see people who've been at an investment bank for a few years looking to pivot into looking to do an MBA. We often see people who've done like due diligence at a big four looking to pivot, looking to do an MBA. We see them all the time as well. Fidelity, Vanguard, and generally buy side, we don't see very often. So the schools will like that, definitely from a professional perspective. And also a couple of promotions in 3 years isn't bad either. I suspect that leads to quite strong letters of recommendation as well. So really strong professional profile here. Really, really nice. Extracurriculars, big brothers, big sisters. I had a client that I worked with previously who had a role with them who did very, very well in MBA applications. Schools like this association with a big brand foundation, demonstrated impact. They know what that means. They know what that work at a big brand means, as opposed to like your own little thing that you set up where they're like, they have no idea whether you've really done anything meaningful. Here, they know that the extracurriculars have value. So that'll be awesome for a leadership essay, for for essay purposes. Demographic, we don't know much about OP other than male and around the right age, mid-20s. So I think demographics may be okay. Goals, pretty vague. Obviously, it's friend asking. So friend maybe doesn't know what OP wants to do in his life. But either way, they're very vague and they need to be a lot more specific than this. My suggestion, given OP's background when it comes to goals, is to either pivot industry, which would be a kind of financial analyst type role in a other industry, and that's pivoting industry, or to pivot role, which would be something like a different role within the investment management industry. corporate development, for example, within investment management. So pivot role or pivot industry, but preferably not both. Good place to start anyway. Okay, so overall, really decent profile. Missing a bit of detail, but I think I think solid.
Mhm. And what school tier would you put this profile in?
Yeah, big assumptions here. Strong test scores and solid execution. We're talking 2 or 3 months of really hard GMAT studying to go from 0 to a 705 GMAT score. That's a huge assumption, but okay, give them the benefit of the doubt. And solid execution of the essays and interviews. We spend 2, 3 months building up a great narrative and a great set of essays with applicants. Again, a big assumption. It's difficult to do, but okay, benefit of the doubt. In that case, I would put OP's profile in M7, including Harvard, Stanford, Wharton. Give it a shot. With that GPA and if OP's GMAT comes in at a 705 or whatever, really strong GMAT score, nothing is off the table here.
Mhm. Okay, and what do you think OP's friend can do to further polish his application?
Yeah, I did a bit of prep on this. Three specific things that come up. One, the goals. I mentioned this briefly, but this idea of strong interest in investing market, like we need that to be way more specific. We need target companies, basically. We need the specific target role, the title, and ideally conversations with people on LinkedIn who have done that role. That's the level of research required for goals, and it's a lot of work, and OP's nowhere near. So that's one thing to polish the application, is start that work. A long-term goal with a North Star would be nice as well. No mention of that right now. Needs polishing. So that's one. Two, I mentioned that OP's like on the cards for HSW, but for Harvard and Stanford in particular, there are a couple of things sort of missing at the moment that will need work. Harvard will come down to leadership at scale,
Mm.
and for that, a really key or good improvement would be to get a official leadership role at Big Brother Big Sister Foundation. At the moment, OP is volunteer mentor, meets young people, mentors them, etc. But if you can get a role, or he she can get a role on the associate board, for example, the junior board, that is where they start to influence like the policies, the decisions, the recruitment of mentors, etc. That leadership role in the extracurricular, that would be way stronger than the pure mentor role. So that's the second thing that OP can do, or that OP's mate can do, to refine the profile. And the third one is build out these extracurriculars at the other charitable foundations. Big Brother Big Sister Foundation is a great one because there's a great brand. With these other ones, a bit of work here and there isn't going to count for very much, if anything. But getting a leadership role or a title within those other foundations in New England, that will be valuable as well. So those are the three things that I think OP can do, or OP's friend can do, in the next 3 or 4 months to strengthen and refine the profile.
Mhm. Okay, and I'm also curious about that Harvard legacy. Does that help?
In theory, no. On paper, no. And the schools will say that legacy does not help. But there are, even if it doesn't help explicitly with the admissions odds, it does help with other parts of the application process, a bit more subtle. For example, having conversations with students and alumni can be easier if you've had, or if you have an alumnus in the family who can introduce you to people,
Yeah.
right? That's one way that it can help subtly, indirectly. The other thing is sort of a general awareness of MBAs, of the admissions process. For example, if in OP's dad or OP's friend's dad did an MBA at, in this case, Harvard, but at any other school, you're more likely to have an MBA on your radar early on in your career. And that might have shaped your career decisions and taken you down a career route that is MBA friendly, and that would obviously benefit your application chances. Or maybe because you are aware of how big a commitment an MBA is, you start the GMAT process earlier, and therefore you secure a higher GMAT score, and that improves your odds.
Mhm.
In other words, having legacy, um, a relative that was a grad can help indirectly. But I would also argue this is what admissions consultants bring, this intimate experience of the program that substitutes having daddy goes to Harvard. So, a nuanced answer there. It doesn't do any harm, put it that way. Unless actually the dude's dad didn't graduate because of a
Didn't
real
graduate.
fight with the school and has a terrible reputation, in which case it could be a slight negative. But yeah, really, it would have to be really bad, I think, for the schools to hold that against the person who didn't graduate's son. That would be pretty harsh.
Okay. And I have another question. We did assume strong test scores as
Mm.
per OP's friend, but what score do you think is enough for the GMAT?
Let's say for round numbers, let's say top five. That's kind of in the middle between the HSW and the M7. So let's say top five. So top five is
Okay.
Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, generally considered Harvard, Stanford, Wharton, Columbia, MIT. For those schools, I would say somewhere in the range of the very high 600s is when OP needs to be. For example, a 685, 695 for the top five type schools. But if OP is going to target HSW, the other finance applicants are going to have very strong scores, and maybe a sort of 705 or higher would be ideal for a Harvard or Stanford
Mhm.
application. So yeah, 685, 705, that kind of range is where OP needs to be.
Yeah. All
Okay.
right. That's that profile thoroughly roasted. Hope your friend appreciates it, OP.
Yeah, I wish I had friends like that. That's awesome. Thank you. Thanks for doing that. Okay, next profile then.
Next profile. Be brutally honest. We
We do
will.
that.
Indian female, 5+ years in finance and PE, a content creator, targeting the Columbia Business School J-term MBA. Some stats. Um, Indian female, OP knows she's ORM, GPA 3.5 out of 4, Bachelor of Commerce from a Mumbai college, GRE 321, considering a retake. OP is also a CA and has 5+ work experience at matriculation, will have 5+ work experience. Currently is an investment analyst at a US-based early stage investment firm focused on edtech, tech, and franchise investments. This is a remote role. Before that, OP interned at a specialist fintech-focused PE fund in India, got a returned offer, turned it down because of long hours, doesn't regret that decision. Before that, OP did a 6-month stint at a digital assets PE firm, managing 10 million. Honest context, CA to PE is a hard switch in India without a top P school pedigree. And OP did this as a deliberate bridging role to get into investment, and it worked. Before that, OP spent 3 years at a big four in India doing audit and assurance for tech clients. And is the startup. The OP is also running a financial literacy platform. It's targeting Indian women. 6 million monthly reach, 25K followers on one platform, and partnerships with well-known Indian fintech brands. OP also holds workshops, zero paid marketing. This is the core of my CBS Ask. I won the Tamer Institute's social venture track and the Lang Fund resources. OPS research specific alumni. This is not a way Columbia will help me grow pitch. OP really wants to go to Columbia. Education extras, pursuing a BS in data science and applications from IIT Madras online. This is a deliberate move to close some skill gaps, OP says. Extracurriculars: trained Indian classical dancer, 2 years volunteer teaching for underprivileged students, student council leadership in college, CSR leadership at the Big Four, international delegate at a leadership conference in Africa, and was a national topper in high school. Why J term specifically? OP startup has active traction right now. A 2 year program means 2 years away from something that is growing. 16 months, focused cohort, faster return. That's the logic. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah. What a great profile evaluation submitted there. OP, thanks for sharing that. Okay, let's go through it academically first. 3.5 out of 4. Not bad. A little bit below Columbia's average, but not bad. 321, not great. OP says considering a retake. I'll answer that immediately. Go for it. Go for it. If you apply with a 321 and get dinged from Columbia, you will severely regret applying with a 321 because that will be one of the key weaknesses of your profile that you could have fixed. So definitely do so. So that's from an academic perspective. Not great yet, but hopefully improving. Work experience, really hardcore buy-side finance experience. Really love this. Took this as a deliberate bridging role. That might be worthy of an essay on its own. I really like that point. Very hardcore finance experience. Good brands in there, I imagine, for the fintech focused PE fund. So really, really interesting. And also, I noticed the Big Four. 3 years at the Big Four. That is very good training, and the schools will recognize that. So, in other words, hardcore training from a Big Four in India and hardcore finance at some best in class PE funds. Love it. Extracurriculars. Again, doesn't get much better than this. Founder of a financial literacy platform targeting Indian women that's gathering traction. So much traction that OP needs the MBA to grow it. Great numbers in there, 25K followers, etc. Can convince the school that that is going to do well. There's enough data there. The dancing, yeah, not so much. You're not applying to dance school, so they don't really care that you can dance. But it might feature in the narrative, for example, if it's meaningful to like your values or it's shaped your development in another way, then it might be useful. But I think really this startup is the extracurricular that stands out. Demographic, Indian, ORM. I know. Yeah, she's right. Age is good though. Age is good. 5 years of work experience is spot on for a full-time MBA program. So that's good. Goals. Honestly, one of the most compelling goals I've ever seen here on Reddit. Really, really clear why the J term at Columbia with the Lang Fund and the Tamer Institute, really clear why you need those for your goals. You want to build and develop this platform, and I can totally see, and the schools will totally be able to see why you need an MBA for that. The only thing I would say from a goals perspective is they're gonna be batting for you. They're gonna like this narrative, but they might also see you as a bit of a risk. So make sure that you've got a clear backup in case this, as a post MBA goal, does not work out.
Mm.
For example, a return offer from your current company, even if it's just verbal, mentioned by your recommender, perhaps in the letter of recommendation, that would be really valuable to put them at ease, to reassure them that if this thing doesn't work for whatever reason, you've got something to go back to. You're not going to be unemployed, damaging their stats, moaning about them online, etc. So have a good backup plan in place. Not that it undermines your plan A, just that it reassures them. Cool. And so overall, a strong professional, strong extracurriculars, currently let down by a weak GRE, but hopefully going to be improved. Really, really clear J-term narrative. OP doesn't need an internship, wants to go straight back to what she's doing. So very good profile overall.
Okay. And OP's first question is about the GRE. The
Yeah,
verbal is
yeah.
soft at 156, worth a retake with 4 weeks deadline. You answered that. You want to expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, retake it. I just think you'll kick yourself if you don't. Seriously, OP, you've put so much work into the rest of your profile, the startup, the career pivot. It'd be such a shame to apply to the J term and for them to like everything about your profile and then be like, yeah, but that GRE score is not great. It's going to bring down our average. It'd be such a shame. I wouldn't want that. So do it again. Hire a tutor if you need to. I realized time. This was at point of writing. This was 4 weeks to deadline. I think it's a couple of weeks old as well. So we're really at crunch time. Hire a tutor if you need to. Pull out all the stops to get that from a 321 to the 326 or so Columbia average for sure.
Okay. And second question is about being, or it's a crowded lane. Is OP startup angle genuinely differentiating, or do AdCom see tendencies here?
Um, Indian female in finance with a startup is actually still, with a kind of social impact startup, is actually still quite crowded lane, as you'd put it. What's unique is that you've got the startup and with proven growth and the VC experience to know what the investors are looking for. And that is really unique. Now, you do need new skills, right? Marketing being a key one, formal leadership training probably as well. But it's not that you've got a startup that's differentiating here. It's that you've got a startup plus VC experience, which that is unique, and that is the kind of the golden fit that schools all really like. Because I think if anyone's going to raise money for this venture, it's somebody with 3 years of experience in PE or a couple of years of experience in PE and a network. So that's why it's unique. Just make sure that comes through in the essays.
Okay. Question three roles in under 2 years will look like job hopping to some readers, but I
Mm,
have a clean narrative for each transition. Worried it won't land.
yeah. It's fair. It's a fair concern. Yeah, basically needs very, very clear essays.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's doable, right? You've managed to explain it in a Reddit post. You can probably explain it in an essay as well. So I think we're okay. But yes, it is a concern to be aware of and to address it directly. A couple of points, a couple of places to address it. One is you might want to write an optional essay all about this particularly if it doesn't come up naturally in your essays, also in your normal essays, your main essays, or the schools give you about 300 characters typically to explain why you left each role and why you took on each role. And this is aside from the normal essays. And you should be maxing out those 300 or so characters to explain this move and these moves that you talk about in as much detail as you can to reassure the schools. So basically, the answer is you're right. It's something to be aware of, but it is something that can be handled with an optional essay and by writing the why did you leave essays as well.
And last question, revenue on the startup is very early. Does reach and partnerships carry enough weight without strong revenue numbers?
Okay, look, it's not a competition of who's got the biggest startup. Because if it was, every MBA would be like a unicorn founder and wouldn't be much fun on the program. Very concentrated, not much diversity in the program, blah, blah, blah. So it's not a competition who's got the biggest revenue of their startup. That's the first thing. The other thing is, even a startup that's failed can be really valuable from a narrative perspective. We've seen this time and time again. I had a client last year who got into Harvard based on my startup failed because narrative. And so it can be done. It shows resilience, it shows determination, interesting lessons that somebody who's worked a corporate life hasn't learned. So a failed startup or a small startup can also be very valuable for essays. The key is that you need to convince them of that. And it can be difficult to explain why a failed or small startup has taught you a lot. In fact, it is difficult generally, but it needs to be done. So that's quite a unique challenge that applicants with a small startup need to overcome. And then the other thing is, as I said earlier, have a backup plan. Show them that you're not, you're focused on this startup and you're committed to it. But if it doesn't work out for whatever reason, you've got a job you can go to. You've got a backup career, ideally backed up by a recommender who's saying, and by the way, I've told OP that if they want to return to our company, they can. Right, that removes the risk of being unemployed after graduation, and schools like that because unemployed graduates is not a good look for them.
Mhm. Okay. All of OP's questions are done. Shall we
Awesome.
move on to our last profile of the day?
Yeah, let's do it. Profile 6. We covered a lot today, haven't we?
Yeah. All right, profile 6. How likely am I to get admitted to a top MBA in the UK? Age
Mhm.
31 now, will be applying for next year, waiting on the Shevening application. GMAT is 720. Nationality is Thai. GPA bachelor's in electrical engineering with a 2.68 undergrad GPA and a 3.7 master's GPA in data science. Work experience 10 years, 7 years as an esports team lead, competing all around the world at high level as well as being the national representative. 1 year as a coach, 6 months as a sales representative, B2B safety heavy lifting products, 2 years as a government consultant, founded a company, a B2B guiding company, which gets benefits through government regulations via tax incentives. Also, an ongoing CSR initiative to help local farmers with knowledge and equipment. OP is also currently working as a general manager at a tech startup, experience in both the business and the tech side. Goal, working in MBB or Big Four as in management strategy or tech innovation. Desired schools, LBS, LSC, Imperial, Oxford, or Cambridge. A few questions. We will get to those. What do you think overall, Sam?
Yeah, okay. Right, academic. No beating about the bush. A 2.68 is shocking.
Yeah.
That's really, really not ideal. A 720 is a solid score on the old test. I imagine they might be coming up on that not being valid anymore potentially soon. So I think OP's in a bit of a, like do it now before that score expires, I think, position. Um, the data science masters helps show that you're not thick, but doesn't offset the GPA from a from a rankings perspective. It's the undergrad GPA that schools have to submit, so not ideal. Would be positive if that GPA is not actually on a 4.0 scale and it's been converted, but I think we have to assume it is. So okay, academic, but not ideal. I believe, don't quote me on this, but I think 7.5 is high enough for on the IELTS front for Oxford, for example. Professional. Now, maybe I'm being dumb, but the sequence is unclear to me. Which one do you think is first, Mal? Do you have any sense?
I thought the general manager bit was more recent.
Yeah, my guess is that as well. Let's assume that the OP started at the esports team and then progressed to general manager because obviously general manager of a tech startup is quite an advanced role. So okay, so hopefully that's the sequence. I got that right. Basically, that current role is interesting and is sort of a more classic pre-MBA role than the others. Certainly, the esports coach is not a typical pre-MBA role. Could be relevant from an extracurricular perspective, maybe, but basically a very broad professional experience.
Yeah.
Esports competing and coach, and then a sales rep for heavy lifting products, and then founded a government consultant, basically using tax incentives, ongoing CSR initiative, help farmers, and a general manager of a tech startup. It's like absolutely all
Mm.
over the place. I think with the right narrative and the right essays, it could be framed positively, but it's definitely a risk. that there looks like a cat chasing cars or a dog chasing cars, sorry, and like has really no idea. And I think, to be honest, that's why OP's goal is what it is, which is like I've done all these sort of non-traditional roles, and now I want to go into the most traditional role I can find. Um, the Before we get on to goals, let's just quickly talk about demographics. Thai is very underrepresented, slightly on the older side at 31, but the European programs, the UK programs that OP is targeting, tend to have slightly higher experience. So fine, not an issue. Also, does seem like quite a good fit with a shorter program given the age. So that works well. Now let's talk about these goals. MBB, Big Four Consulting. I haven't ranted about this in a while, so allow me to rant again. So many people are putting MBB as their goal, right? It's probably 50%, 50% of MBA applicants are putting that as their goal. Are you going to stand out? Are you going to be the person that breaks into MBB consulting? Well, let's think about who you're up against. You're up against MBB consultants who have already been there. That's the top tier. You're up against Big Four consultants who have already worked there. You're up against the other tiers of consultants like the LEKs, the Kearneys of the world. You've got so many other consultants who've actually got real consulting experience, management consulting experience that you're up against. Are they going to break into MBB or are you going to break into MBB? It's more likely to be them. Lots of them, particularly the MBB people, have already got guaranteed return offers to MBB. Why would you go up against them? There's no point. Dumb. And a lot of them are going to be sponsored for their MBA. So the business school doesn't have to give them any scholarship money. Don't go up against these people. It's not you. It's not you. And if you did, this government consultant founded a company that is going to do a hell of a lot of lifting because as far as I can see, that is your only consulting experience. And if it's self-founded, it sounds like you are just a freelance consultant. And that is no way going to compete with the MBB consultants who have been absolutely crushing it for the last 3 or 4 years. And they're sponsored and they have guaranteed offers. It's just it's just plain dumb to put yourself up against them. So I don't think goals currently make sense. I would much prefer, I quite like this sort of tech innovation angle. I would much prefer a goal that plays into the tech and particularly esports theme. So a tech goal, a strategy in tech goal makes a lot of sense. And I was thinking about like which tech roles that would look like. And I had a bit of a brainwave and I think I've just come up with the best goal in the world for OP. London houses the European or international offices of Rockstar Games.
My favorite.
A strategy or innovation or tech role at Rockstar Games, having been an esports competitor and coach, you might even have connections there still. That's a great post MBA role that combines OP's broad experience with OP's passion for esports and brings you into a really, really little niche where now all of a sudden you don't have to be the best of all the MBBs. You have to be the best of the aspiring tech strategy people, particularly the ones focused on gaming. You're at an advantage there. Use that advantage for God's sake. Okay, I hope I made that point. So anyway, a really good goal there for OP would be a strategy or tech innovation role at like Rockstar Games in London. Of these schools, basically LBS is in London, Imperial is in London, Oxford is within an hour of London, Cambridge is within an hour of London. So I guess I'm going to preempt the first question. All of these schools will fit your profile if you're going down this tech innovation gaming route that I'm talking about. LSE, as far as I'm aware, only has a master's at the moment. It doesn't have an MBA program, as far as I understand. So that's slightly different. And also, I would note that just in terms of ranking, I would put them as, and it's quite a clear ranking emerging now between the remaining schools: LBS, Oxford, Cambridge, Imperial. I don't think many people in the industry would argue with me about that ranking. So that's how you should be focused. I would also note another point that I wanted to say, an interesting one. Imperial, if you look at their website, they have a cutoff for GPA. I think it's like 3.5 or something. I know, whatever. They have a cutoff, and they say we want applicants with a GPA over this. However, I'm going to spill a secret here. In fact, no, I'm not. No, I'm not. Just all I would say is don't take them too strictly on that GPA cutoff. Don't take them too strictly on it. You got a 2.68. It might be too low for them, but just, I think, give it a shot anyway. Give it a shot anyway. So, okay. The other point I wanted to mention is OP is focused on the UK for good reason, but a lot of people watching this will be focused on the US. And so, if OP was open to the US as well as the UK, where would he or he be focused? For tech, as I've mentioned in several other rows today, but just to reiterate, Kellogg, MIT, CMU TEPA, and the MBA/Tech MBA programs are the really strong tech programs that you would focus on if you were applying to the US as well as the UK. Cool.
All right. I saw in the comments that OP said he's not interested in the US at the moment because of financial reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And is also planning to work in Thailand after graduation for a while.
Okay.
So OP's next question is, how would my master's degree affect the profile?
Yeah, basically, look, a small positive. It's small positive. It shows you're smart. If your goals, like the strategy at Rockstar Games goal that I mentioned, is going to be data focused, and I would argue it probably is, then it positions you better for that post MBA role, and the schools will like that. But to be clear, the schools are not ranked on candidates' master's GPA because not every candidate has a master's, so they can't be. So it's not going to fully offset the undergrad, but it doesn't do any harm.
And is there any recommendation to strengthen the profile?
Yeah. So the first one is fix the goal. I mentioned this already. MBB is really not the goal that OP should be focused on. Doesn't have enough consulting experience, being the key reason for that. But also, there's just some much better, much more interesting goals that we've talked about. That's one. Two, I wonder if there's an esports community angle here. So for those who watch Reddit roast often, one of the kind of extracurricular that I like the most and that schools often really value is a community focused extracurricular, building community. Why? Because schools are going to be bringing together, 3, 4, 5, 600 people from different places and bringing them together. And they've got 2 years quite intensely. They need people who are going to build a community among that cohort. And if you've shown that you've done that in the past, for example, within the esports domain, that would strengthen your profile. So find that like community building angle of esports. I think that could potentially strengthen your profile as well. And then the third thing is that I mentioned that this different work experience is scattered here, there, and everywhere. There will be a common thread between all of those. I don't know what it is, but there will be one. And there will be transferable skills as well, right? Mm-hmm. To start the thought process here, if strategy at Rockstar Games is your post-MBA goal, the skills that are relevant, obviously the gaming network and the intimate understanding of the games themselves. 2, the driven nature of being an independent consultant. An understanding of government regulation and how it impacts corporate development. Mm-hmm. General manager will be a team leader role. So the team leadership is transferable to strategy at Rockstar Games. So figure out what the transferable skills are that apply to your target role. That's number 3.
Mm-hmm. Okay. That's all of OP's questions.
Great. Well, look, I hope we've covered all of the questions here. And if I've roasted your profile and you'd like to to speak to me about sort of next steps, what admissions consulting would look like, etc., please feel free to get in touch. I believe we've got another general question to touch on today, Mel.
You've got a bonus.
Bonus.
Yes. All right. Anyone else feeling a massive drop in work performance and passion while prepping for their MBA? OP says, I used to be a high performer, ex-startup, fast-paced background, significant pay jump within a year in the same company. But ever since I decided to pursue an MBA, I've checked out mentally. I'm doing the bare minimum just to keep things running while my brain is 80% focused on GMAT and the essays. I feel a mix of guilt and I don't give a damn anymore. Is anyone else in the same boat?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are. It's the MBA application process, start to finish, for most people is like 4, 5, maybe more, 6 months, including the GMAT and everything. You can't do that process well while also nailing your job. Often, very, very difficult. I have a theory that you've got three things you can focus on: GMAT, applications, and work. And it's only possible to do two of those well at the same time.
Mhm.
If you are going to do, if you're working, first focus on the GMAT and then focus on your application essays. Don't try and do both of them and your job at the same time. You'll screw it up. Or if you're unemployed, fine, you can probably do studying and applications at the same time. But trying to do three at the same time is almost impossible. And so, yeah, as OP says, like motivation is going to wane and you're going to end up refocusing on the applications. And that's totally normal. I did the same thing. I was working in investment banking at SocGen in London when I was doing my MBA applications, and I was supposed to be at my desk at 6:30 or so in the morning. So that's already an early start. But I was cramming an hour or two of GMAT studies before work. So at like 4 till 6
In the morning.
in the morning before starting my job. And yes, of course, the quality and the motivation of your day job is going to drop while you're doing that. Of course, it is. I think that's pretty normal. The only thing I would say here, yes, it's normal, and I'm okay normalizing this, except don't piss off your recommenders. Don't piss off your recommenders. If your intensity at work is going to drop, remember that you're going to need your recommenders, probably your current manager, to write a recommendation later on. And so there's no point getting a great GMAT score only to piss off your manager and get a shit recommendation.
Mhm.
So there is a bit of a trade-off here. But generally speaking, yeah, it's pretty normal.
Okay. That's all of our profiles. A bonus for today. We've had an extra long roast. Thank you for that.
Oh, what a long roast that was. And I think also we're going to add a blooper next of what happened last
Of
time.
how many times you've tried this?
How
Yeah.
many times we've tried this and what happened last time we tried. We'll put that after the video. Anyway, look, if you've enjoyed this roast and you'd like to have your profile roasted, feel free to send it over. We're both very active on Reddit and you can DM us a link. Add me on LinkedIn as well. I'm very active on LinkedIn, constantly haranguing people on LinkedIn for their crappy AI usage, etc. And if you're hiring an admissions consultant, we're currently taking on clients for round one applications. It's 20th of May at the time of recording. So now going into September is peak round one application season. And we're here if you are hiring a consultant. Okay. On that note, Mel, thank you very, very much. We managed to finish this in one go. I will see you for our next roast very, very soon.
Yeah. See you for the next roast.
Yeah. Hello and welcome to Reddit Roast, Mal. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, Sam.
So for anybody,
Yeah, okay.